The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. At that time, Jesus came to Jericho and intended to pass through the town. Now a man there named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector and also a wealthy man, was seeking to see who Jesus was. But he could not see him because of the crowd, for he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree in order to see Jesus, who was about to pass that way. When he reached the place, Jesus looked up and said, "Zacchaeus, come down quickly, for today I must stay at your house." And he came down quickly and received him with joy. When they saw this, they began to grumble, saying, "He has gone to stay at the house of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Behold, half of my possessions, Lord, I shall give to the poor. And if I have extorted anything from anyone, I shall repay it 4 times over." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a descendant of Abraham. For the Son of Man was come to seek and to save what was lost." The Gospel of the Lord. So today we continue reading through the book of Revelation, and yesterday I said that this is the last week of Ordinary Time, so we'd be going through the book of Revelation, and I was actually wrong. We're in the second to last week of Ordinary Time, which means we have 2 whole weeks to talk about the book of Revelation. So we're going to keep talking about the book. So yesterday I started giving you some of the historical context of the vision of St. John's vision. I talked about how the prophecy about this happening soon, about Jesus coming soon, all these different things are pointing to the events of 70 AD, in which Jerusalem was destroyed, and there's a great catastrophe, and the temple was destroyed once and for all, never to be rebuilt again. What I want to talk about today is continuing that historical context. So the time in which the book of Revelation was written, the time in which St. John had his vision. I think the correct understanding of the book is that John had the vision just before 70 AD. Many scholars deny this, and because of that, they get really confused on the symbolism in the vision. Many people think that John had the vision towards the end of the 1st century, about 25 years later than 70 AD. And there's a number of reasons why they think that, but basically there's one church father who seems to argue that, and so everybody just kind of accepts that. But some of the manuscripts of the book of Revelation say that John had the vision while he was in exile under Emperor Nero. Emperor Nero. Remember Nero from your world history classes? Nero was not a very good person, right? Very crazy person. And many of the symbols in the book of Revelation are actually references to Nero. For example, the beast that rises out of the sea. The book of Revelation says that his number is 666, right, which a lot of people think that 666 has this crazy notation to it. When I was in high school, actually, my lunch code was 666. And so people were kind of scared of that, and I think I turned out okay. All right, the number 666, it doesn't really mean anything except symbolically. So in the ancient languages, letters also had numbers attached to them. And so in Greek, the name Nero adds up to 666. Likewise, there are some Syriac manuscripts which say the number is 616. And in Syriac, 616 adds up to Nero's name. All right, so that's what it's meaning. It's symbolic, referencing to Nero. How else do we know that it's Nero? Well, in the book of Revelation, it says that the beast arises from the sea. And later on in the book, the whore of Babylon is seated upon the beast. So what does that mean, the beast that rises from the sea? In the Old Testament, the sea represented the Gentile nations. Right? So Rome would be very fitting for a beast rising up from the Gentile nations. It was the dominant world force. Not only that, but in 70 AD, when the Romans came in to destroy Jerusalem, guess the means by which they came? They came from the Mediterranean. They came from the sea to destroy the city. And the whore of this city is Jerusalem itself, and we'll talk about that later this week. How else do we know that it's Nero? Well, if you know anything about Nero's life and history, it's kind of fitting that he would be called a beast. Nero famously was rather crazy. First of all, he made one of his horses a senator of Rome. He killed his own mother, kicked her to death. He was a very evil and wicked man. He was also known for blaming a fire in Rome, blaming it on Christians, and then persecuting Christians. He's the person who was responsible for having Christians burn in the middle of the city as light posts. He would have them hang on lampposts and burn them alive to give light to the city. Likewise, Nero, one of his pastimes was going into the arena of the Colosseum and dressing up as a beast and violating victims of the Colosseum. He truly was a beastly person, a representative of the evil forces of the world coming into one person. So that's who the beast is in the book of Revelation. And so the mark and everything like that, it's all in some ways reference to Nero himself. Now, I mentioned the whore is Jerusalem. How do we know that? Some people, when they read the book of Revelation, they think the whore of the beast or the whore of Babylon is the Catholic Church. Right? Martin Luther famously said this, and many of the Protestant reformers. They thought this because they didn't understand the Old Testament references to the whore or the harlot. In the Old Testament, as I've explained before, one of the ways that God explained his relationship to his people was like a marriage. It was like a marriage. And so in the prophets Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Hosea, God's description of his people, centered in Jerusalem, is that when they were unfaithful to his teachings, they were like an unfaithful wife. They played the harlot or the whore with Gentile nations. And that was a great image of what was happening in Jerusalem at the time of this vision of Revelation. God's people, the Jews in Jerusalem, many of the religious authorities, not everyone, many Jews converted to Christianity, but those who did not became the greatest persecutors of the Christians, of God's people. You read through the Acts of the Apostles and the letters of St. Paul, the greatest enemies of God's kingdom was the religious establishment in Jerusalem. And so they became the perfect image for the harlot, the person who is unfaithful to God's teachings. And in the end, the book of Revelation prophesies that even though the harlot was seated upon the beast for now, one day the beast would turn against her and burn her with fire, which is exactly what the Romans did to Jerusalem just a couple of years after John had this vision. So we'll continue to talk about these things as we go through the book of Revelation, but that's some of the historical context. The next couple days we'll be talking more about what these symbols mean of these visions of John.